If you have a true strange story of the unexplained you'd like to hear read on the podcast, email it to madamestrangeways@gmail.com or go to madamestrangeways.com or just check the show notes for a link. I can't wait to read it. Welcome, strangelings, to a special deep dive episode. You'll hear all about one of Ed and Lorraine Warren's classic paranormal case files, Annabelle the Possessed Doll. As usual, I'll share the scary story first, then drag you down the rabbit hole with me, kicking and screaming. And if that's what you're into, well, maybe you also want to hear your name read at the beginning of every single episode. Or maybe you want spooky bonus content. Then join the Patreon at patreon.com/madamestrangeways. Thank you so much to my very first patron, TJ Hodder. And now on to the story of Annabelle, here on Madame Strangeways. Annabelle, the Haunted Doll, a retelling. Donna, a nursing student in the 70s, received an antique doll as a birthday gift from her mother. It was a Raggedy Ann doll, a popular doll that went back as far as the 1920s. The doll was large, at nearly 2 feet tall, and was a rag doll made of soft cloth with bright red yarn for hair, black buttons for eyes, a stitched triangular nose, and a serene painted smile, dressed in a frilly dress and apron with signature striped stockings. Donna loved the gift, having fond memories of Raggedy Ann from her childhood. Initially, she displayed the doll on her bed as decoration. But within days, she and her roommate Angie began noticing strange occurrences. At first, they both found that the doll seemed to move on its own. Sometimes, Donna might have arranged the doll's arms one way, only to find it posed completely differently when no one had touched it. Then the women would leave the house and return to find the doll in a completely different room than the room they had left it in when no one else was in the house. Sometimes they'd even find it seated on the couch with its legs crossed, as if relaxing. Other times they would discover it standing upright on its own, an impossible feat for a rag doll. On several occasions, Donna distinctly remembered leaving the doll in the living room, only to return and find it back in her bedroom, laying on her bed, patiently waiting for her. Donna and Angie also began to discover notes left around their tiny apartment, written on parchment paper that said, "Help us," and "Help me," and "Help Lou," seemingly referring to their friend of the same name. The handwriting seemed to belong to a very young child, but no children had been to their apartment. And, chillingly, neither of them owned any parchment paper, the paper used to leave the notes. One day, Donna got a gut feeling that something wasn't right. She was drawn to inspect the Annabelle doll and saw what appeared to be droplets of blood appearing from thin air on its soft fabric hands and chest. Desperate for answers, Donna contacted a psychic medium. The medium held a seance and introduced Donna and her roommate Angie to the spirit of Annabelle Higgins, a 7-year-old girl who had played in the fields that existed where Donna and Angie's apartment complex now stood. Tragically, Annabelle's lifeless body had been discovered in the fields, and her restless spirit had chosen the Raggedy Ann doll to inhabit in an attempt at making a connection with Donna and Angie. Sympathetic to the little girl's tragic story, the women invited Annabelle's spirit to stay. What they didn't know, however, was that this kind of invitation only made things far worse. The unexplainable activity intensified when their friend Lou, who had long suspected the Raggedy Ann doll was evil, experienced a terrifying nightmare. While laying in bed, paralyzed with fear, he watched in abject horror as the rag doll glided slowly up his leg of its own accord, climbed up onto his chest, and began choking him. He couldn't breathe. He couldn't stop the doll. Eventually, deprived of oxygen, he blacked out. The next morning, he was sure that was not a dream at all. Shortly after, while Lou was at Donna and Angie's apartment again against his better judgment, he heard the sound of rustling from Donna's bedroom. Afraid it might have been an intruder, Lou volunteered to check it out. Donna's bedroom was empty, except for Annabelle, lying limp and crumpled in the corner. Unsettled after his supposed nightmare, he quickly checked for any signs of forced entry, but found nothing amiss. Still, something felt wrong. Slowly, he approached the doll despite his experiences and suddenly felt an icy sensation prickle down the back of his neck, the unmistakable feeling that someone or something was right behind him. He whirled around, expecting to find the intruder, but there was no one. Without warning, a searing pain exploded in his chest. Doubling over, he clutched at his shirt, his hands coming away stained with blood. When he unbuttoned his shirt, he and Angie were horrified to find 7 distinct claw marks scored across his chest. 3 vertical slashes intersected by 4 horizontal ones. Yet as quickly as the injuries appeared, they began to heal. By the following day, half of the scratches had vanished. Within 48 hours, there was no trace of the attack at all. After Lou's encounters with the doll, Donna again sought help from a professional, but that time she wasn't going to mess around. She contacted an Episcopal priest named Father Hagen. Father Hagen, who felt he was in over his head, contacted another priest he felt was more knowledgeable about spirits, named Father Cook. Father Cook, rather than take it on himself, decided to bring the case to the attention of the renowned ghost hunters and paranormal investigators, Ed and Lorraine Warren. The Warrens had been hunting ghosts and exploring haunted houses for nearly 2 decades when they were called to investigate the Annabelle incident. In 1952, they both founded the New England Society for Psychic Research and were considered pioneers in the field of paranormal investigation. After assessing the situation, Ed said, "The doll wasn't possessed. It was being manipulated by an inhuman spirit to create the illusion of possession. This entity was looking for a way to break the women down, eventually possessing one of them." Lorraine, known for her clairvoyant abilities, confirmed Ed's assessment, describing an overwhelming sense of malevolence emanating from the doll. "This wasn't Annabelle Higgins," she later said. "This was something much darker, a demonic entity in disguise." The Warrens conducted a blessing of the apartment and removed the doll to keep it at their house for safekeeping. During the drive home, they reported multiple near accidents as their car's brakes failed. Ed stated that he stopped the disturbances only after sprinkling the doll with holy water. After returning safely home, Ed placed the doll in a chair beside his desk, where it initially seemed to remain still. But within days, strange activity began again, this time at the Warrens' home. Annabelle levitated multiple times before falling limp and lifeless again as if nothing had happened. Weeks later, the doll began appearing in different rooms of the house without explanation, as if moving and walking on her own. When the Warrens locked the doll in their office while away, they'd often return to find it inexplicably seated upstairs in Ed's favorite easy chair, seemingly waiting for them. One day, Father Jason Bradford, a Catholic priest and exorcist, visited the Warrens. Spotting the doll on its chair, he picked it up, dismissed it as harmless, and tossed it carelessly back into its seat, saying, "You're just a rag doll, Annabelle. You can't hurt anyone." Ed immediately warned him, "That's the one thing you better not say." Before leaving, Lorraine urged Father Jason to drive carefully and to call her once he was home, recalling their dangerous drive after their first encounter with Annabelle. She felt an overwhelming sense of dread, but couldn't convince him to stay. Hours later, Father Jason phoned the Warrens with terrifying news. On his drive home, his car brakes failed as he approached a busy intersection, leading to a near-fatal accident that completely totaled his car. He was lucky to be alive. The incident reinforced the Warrens' belief in Annabelle's dangerous nature. They placed the Annabelle doll in their occult museum in Monroe, Connecticut, securing it in a locked glass case inscribed with a sign, "Warning, positively do not open." Despite its containment, though, Annabelle's reputation only continued to grow. One of the museum's most infamous stories involves a young man who mocked Annabelle during a visit. Ed Warren recounted, "This young man went up to the doll, banged on the glass, and taunted it, saying, 'If you're real, scratch me.' I told him to leave, and he did, laughing about it. 3 hours later, he was dead." The man and his girlfriend left the museum on a motorcycle. Shortly after, they crashed head-on into a tree, killing him instantly and leaving his girlfriend with severe injuries. Lorraine later reflected on the event, saying that these objects are dangerous, not because of their material, but because of what they represent, a gateway to something far worse. That was a retelling of the original Annabelle story, which is a purportedly true case file of Ed and Lorraine Warren, the infamous Catholic paranormal investigator couple featured in the Conjuring movie franchise. Much like the Marvel universe, there is a Conjuring universe. So in addition to the Conjuring films and the Nun films, and I don't know if The Devil Made Me Do It was technically a Conjuring film. I don't remember off the top of my head. Anyway, there's 9 movies in the Conjuring franchise, and 3 of those movies are Annabelle movies. Pause really quickly, though, because let me just address this. Welcome to what is now an accidental series on the many case files of the Warrens. So I had intended with the best of intentions, I had intended for this episode to be a deep dive about them, about Ed and Lorraine Warren. I wanted to talk about their lives, their legacies, blah, 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 their case files. But there's just so much juicy stuff in just this story, and then also all of the other stories. I can't possibly tell it all in one episode, or we'd be here for 666 hours. So here we are instead in part 2 of what is now a series on the purportedly true stories of Ed and Lorraine Warren's and paranormal investigative case files. The first episode is actually the episode 19. That's the Amityville Horror episode. So if you want to hear all of them, you can go back and listen. You don't have to pause and go back though. These are standalones. You can listen to them individually. You can mix and match however you want to do it. But technically, that's the episode that kicked off the series that I didn't realize was going to be a series. So these are just the deep dive episodes. I will go back in the next episode to reading reader submitted stories. So if you have a true story that you want to hear read on the show, feel free, email it to madamestrangeways@gmail.com or go to madamestrangeways.com. Right. So the sources for the story of Annabelle that you just heard, the sources for that start with the Nesper blog, which is NESPR. That is the New England Society for Psychic Research, founded by the famous paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren that I just mentioned. They founded it back in 1952. It is now run by their son-in-law, but not their daughter. It's run by their son-in-law, Tony Spera, who seems to be super into this stuff still. So good for him. The second source was The Demonologist, a book written by Gerald Brittle in 1980 about Ed and Lorraine's experiences and some of their case files up until that point. But it's worth noting they were not writers, so their agents would hire authors to write their stories for them. So those are the two main stories for that retelling. For that story that I just read you, those are the two sources. However, for the rest of the episode, I lean heavily on another source, which is a book called The Exorcist Effect, which is a phenomenal book. I cannot recommend it enough. It's written by Joseph Laycock and Eric Harrelson. This book is amazing. I really should have read it before my Amityville Horror episode because it ties in so much with what I was discussing in that episode about laying the groundwork for the Satanic Panic and all the connections between having watched The Exorcist and then Ronald DeFeo Jr. claiming, a devil made me do it. So that would have just been really, really helpful if I had read it before I did that episode. Anyway, The Exorcist Effect is a historical study of the ongoing relationship between religious culture in the West and horror movies, looking particularly at the period from 1968 to present. And 1968, of course, being when the movie Rosemary's Baby was released. Just in a nutshell, Rosemary's Baby and The Exorcist really primed America to be more open to the idea of demons and Satan being real and present danger. Which, prior to these movies, it was mostly only fundamentalists who believed in the devil and demons. But then in the late 60s, early 70s, you start to see this really stark rise in public belief in Satan and the paranormal in general. And let me tell you, Ed and Lorraine Warren glommed onto this, and they held on tight with a death grip. So paranormal investigating at this point was already their bread and butter. But when you've got the tide of public opinion shifting and rising toward belief in the demonic and demons and Satan, suddenly they begin to brand themselves not just as ghost hunters, but now they're demon hunters. Interesting that Ed Warren waited until The Exorcist swept the nation in 1973 to start calling himself a demonologist. Isn't that interesting? Interesting. Okay, I don't want to get ahead of myself. We're going to revisit this just briefly, just a brief visit to it a little bit later. The point is, The Exorcist Effect. Check it out. It's amazing. I really can't recommend it enough. Give it a listen. Well, actually, this is how dedicated I was to reading this book. okay, I should be editing this out, but I'm going to keep it in. Reading an actual book makes me go to sleep now. Like my eyes get tired and I fall asleep. So I have to do audiobooks. Well, they don't have an audiobook. Joseph Laycock, Eric Harrelson, if you're listening, I really wanted an audiobook of this. Well, I figured out Alexa will read it to me. And is it the best? No. Is her inflection always right? Does she say wound instead of wound and live instead of live? Yes, but I think she can be forgiven because she is a robot. Anyway, that's how dedicated I was to reading this, as I have been listening to the book read in Alexa's voice. And some of the stuff that she's reading in this book out loud to me is very shocking to hear it read in Alexa's voice. So don't listen to it like I did unless you're really dedicated, but you can get a physical copy or a digital copy of the book. Okay, just one more caveat. Thank you for your patience. One more caveat before I get too far into this. I do want to say that one of many reasons I feel so strongly about Ed and Lorraine Warren is that my mother was influenced by the demonic fear-mongering and satanic panic that the Warrens helped fuel. Which means that I too was influenced because I was just a child. And as a child, with undiagnosed and wildly untreated anxiety and mild obsessive tendencies due to childhood trauma, the last thing I needed was my mother telling me that invisible demons who wanted to hurt me could be sitting right next to me at any time, anywhere, even right now, even this very moment. And if you've ever suffered from anxiety, you already have a zillion invisible things to worry about and be scared of. You don't need help. You don't need help thinking of those invisible things that can hurt you. And you definitely don't need your caretaker, who you trust, telling you that Satan is real and we're at war with him. I've spent well over a decade unraveling this demonic sweater by just pulling at the strings and just walk away. I don't remember exactly how that goes. If you know, you know. Personally, my brain, I don't know how yours works. My brain responds really well to things like facts and proof. So educating myself about these things that used to scare the hell out of me, it soothes me. And my sincere hope is that it may soothe some of you as well. The thing is there's plenty of unexplained stuff out there to keep us up at night. We don't need potentially grifters or possible flimflammery making it worse. We don't. And Ed Warren created his own demon lore to suit his needs. Literally, he took liberties with and basically created his own fanfic universe of how demons worked. And he did that, like I said, to suit his own needs. And those needs included telling as many people as possible that you listening right now, he wanted you to think that you could be the victim of an invisible demon. And the kicker is, he's dead now, but when he was alive and he was active, he would have wanted you to call him if you thought that you were being bothered by a demon. Because then him and Lorraine, they could come give you a visit. And then, depending on how marketable whatever was happening to you was, maybe they could get a book deal or a movie franchise out of it, as well as future speaking engagements and guest appearances on talk shows like Sally Jesse Raphael, which, okay, maybe you don't know about it now, but it used to be huge in the 90s. It was sort of, okay, I'm not going to get into it. You can Google it. But he really was on, both of them were on daytime talk shows. And, you may hear that the Warrens didn't take any money for their services, but that doesn't make them selfless or pious. No, they got something out of it. They got a lot of something out of it. So anyway, the point is, the reason I'm telling you this is that there are just so many compelling and fascinating true stories of the unexplained out there. And, some of which you wonderful, beautiful, spooky people kindly share with me. To me, scary stories can and, should be fun. Even when they're scary, even maybe because they're scary, not just despite that. I mean, because they're scary. It's like horror movies. Horror movies let us feel fear and anxiety and safe environments. And in some people, maybe not all, but in some people, it can actually help alleviate anxiety in some people's minds because you're training your mind to learn that yes, it feels afraid right now, but it is safe. And that's what I'm all about. I can feel afraid and not be in danger. You can feel afraid and not be in danger. But with the lore that Ed and Lorraine Warren created from scratch, they wanted you to feel afraid and they wanted you to feel like you were in danger. It was their entire business model. And that's messed up. It is. It's just messed up. All right. Okay. So moving on, we're going to talk about Annabelle, the possessed demon doll who is definitely real and true for sure. So if you've seen any of the Conjuring franchise, you may have seen Annabelle 2014, which is a prequel to The Conjuring and has a totally different story than like I said, it's a completely different story than the story that I just told, which is based on the story told in The Demonologist, the book written in 1980. So in the movie version, it's a husband, which I just don't understand what was wrong with the original story personally. In the movie version, it's a husband who gives his wife this haunted doll. And I think that they somehow shoehorn satanic villains in there too, because that was like Ed and Lorraine's whole thing. Even though there wasn't any in the original story. Interesting. So Annabelle the movie is a prequel. Okay, but don't forget the prequel to the prequel. You've got Annabelle Creation 2017, or you've got the sequel to the prequel, the prequel, the sequel prequel. It was a feature, a creature feature, the sequel prequel to Annabelle. And that's Annabelle Comes Home. That's the sequel prequel, the prequel sequel. Damn. Unlike the story they told in The Demonologist, the first time that we ever hear about this story, the doll isn't a Raggedy Ann doll. In the movie, it's not a Raggedy Ann doll because there was no way that Hasbro was going to approve that because Raggedy Ann is a real copyrighted, trademarked, etc. doll. So they created this, I don't know, this like knockoff ventriloquist dummy looking kind of marionette, like with the big round cheeks and like the big wide eyes. Like, yeah, I mean, I guess it can be creepy. I don't think that the doll that they made for the movie Annabelle, I don't think she was an improvement. I think they could have made a creepier doll that was closer to a Raggedy Ann doll personally. I just don't think that the one that you can Google it. I don't think it's scarier. I think the Raggedy Ann doll is way scarier because like, picture this. I think it's way creepier. Picture it, a Raggedy Ann doll. Okay. Picture it gliding up Lou's leg to strangle him with its smooth little fabric doll hands. Like that's, oh God, I don't like it. It's way scarier, personally. So for anyone who isn't familiar with a Raggedy Ann or Raggedy Andy doll, like I said, they are real. They're trademarked, copyrighted, etc. They're real dolls. I think you can go buy them right now at the store. And they really are almost 2 feet tall. They're like 20 inches tall. It's insane. That's too tall for a doll. And they do have this like vacant, blank, smiling stare, which is why I think it's scarier. And it's like innocent. And you would think if something innocent is probably not going to strangle you until you black out. Whereas if you see, this is my point, if you see the ventriloquist looking doll in the Annabelle movies, you see that doll and you're like, that doll is definitely going to try to suffocate me in my sleep. Like that doll is going to try to murder me. No question. So like I said, you can go buy probably a Raggedy Ann doll right now. I will say, however, that generally they are not possessed. They do not come pre-possessed by demons. And in general, they are not capable of attacking men. But wouldn't that be cool if they did? Wouldn't it be cool if they did that more often? Raggedy Ann and Andy was first mass-produced 1920, back in 1920, very long time ago. So long ago. But hold on, because in this story, the vintage doll that was given to Donna in the story in the 70s, it could have easily been from the 1920s, because that was definitely vintage back then. I mean, it's vintage now, but I'm just saying, like, that was only 50 years earlier. So 50 years is definitely vintage. I think 25 years is considered retro and 50 is considered vintage. Fact check me on that. Feel free. Anyway, it's upsetting, and I'll tell you why it's upsetting. Because the equivalent of buying a 1920s doll in 1970 is the equivalent of buying today a Raggedy Ann doll from 1974. Let that sink in. From 1970 to 1920 is the same distance as 2024 to 1974. I don't like it. So like I said, Hasbro owns it. They purchased the rights in 1983. And if you're keeping score at home, which you may be, that means that Hasbro owns not only the inspiration for Annabelle, the haunted, possessed demon doll, but it also owns the trademark for the term Ouija or Ouija. Coincidence? Possibly. But here's what's really spooky. Oh, well, sad and spooky. Kind of spooky and sad, both of them. Many people believe that Johnny Gruelle, the creator of Raggedy Ann and her brother Andy, many believe that Johnny Gruelle created the doll as a tribute to his daughter Marcella after her tragic death at age 13 from an infected vaccination, which is really sad. So if you think about that, the fact that his daughter died a tragic death, and then he decided he was going to make a doll in her memory, just steeped in grief. And then that same doll later became possessed by a demon that terrorized countless people. And then, oh, wait, no, just kidding. That's not true. Gruelle actually had already begun the process of designing and patenting the Raggedy Ann doll before Marcella's illness, and his U.S. patent application for the prototype design, which is U.S. patent D47789 if you want to go fact check, was filed on May 28th, 1915, just around the time that Marcella became ill, and it was finalized by the U.S. Patent Office on September 7th, 1915. But despite the facts, which I think is a general rule, do not apply to the group I'm about to discuss, the anti-vaccination movement, as recently as 2009, co-opted Raggedy Ann and Raggedy Andy as a symbol of their cause, perpetuating this false myth about poor Marcella's death, which is gross, in a word. I mean, not her death. That's sad. What's gross is using the memory of a dead child like that. Yuck. So that's Raggedy Ann, the doll in the original case file of Annabelle. That is the doll that Annabelle was actually inhabiting, not the creepy, weird Hollywood version that you see in the movie. So now that you know everything that you needed to know about Raggedy Ann, let's get into some of the problems with the Annabelle story as told by Ed and Lorraine Warren. So first of all, and I think this is very important, no one in this story has ever actually been identified. Like, genuinely, in most of the Warrens' other cases, like the Amityville house, the Enfield poltergeist, the Perron family, which is the case that inspired the Conjuring films to begin with, typically you do see real people's names mentioned, and you can go find those people if you wanted to. However, in this case, that's in this actual literal case. In this case, that's not the case. Lots of cases. But not Donna, Angie, any of the multiple priests involved, Lou, who was attacked and strangled by a Raggedy Ann doll. None of them have ever come forward, which is a little weird because of how lucrative not just the Warrens are in general, but also all three of the Annabelle movies. There's a lot of money to be made if they came forward, because this story happened to them. Even if they came up with a new story, there'd be a case to be made. Or, all they would have to do is come forward, and maybe Warner Brothers would want to buy their life rights for $150,000 like they did for Lorraine Warren. We'll get into that in another episode. Anyway, the point is there's a lot of money to be made, and it's really weird that you actually can't identify anybody in this story. Not a single person has ever come forward. Also, from my research, I can't find any written reference to this Annabelle story prior to The Demonologist in 1980. Then you've got Ed Warren kind of contradicting himself. There was this 1980s video made of him touring the occult museum, his occult museum where Annabelle sits in her weird little house cage. So in this video, purportedly, he claims Donna was given the dolls a Christmas gift, not a birthday gift. He also says that Annabelle was a 6-year-old girl who died in a car accident outside of the apartment. But in the Demonologist book, of course, he says that it was the spirit of a child who lived in the area before it was an apartment complex. So, look, he's got a lot of cases. He's got a lot of demons and possessed things all over the place. Obviously, he's going to, get things confused sometimes, but I just feel like in order to be taken seriously, you kind of need to have all your little weird demon ducks in a little demon row. Just a thought. So Joseph Laycock, one of the authors of my now favorite book, The Exorcist Effect, calls the Annabelle legend, quote, an interesting case study in the relationship between pop culture and paranormal folklore, end quote. And he even speculates that this demon doll trope that's popularized by such films as Child's Play, which is where you've got Chucky, Dolly Dearest, which I never heard of actually until now, and then of course Annabelle in the Conjuring universe. These tropes likely emerged from even earlier legends surrounding other infamous possessed dolls that predate Annabelle. You've got one, Robert the Doll, which I'm going to talk about shortly here. And then also, most notably, which I'm also about to talk about, a Twilight Zone episode released 5 years earlier called Living Doll, in which the mother who gives the doll to her daughter, the mother is named Annabelle. Interesting. So Laycock goes on to suggest that the idea of demonically possessed dolls allows modern demonologists to find supernatural evil in the most banal and domestic of places, which is what I was saying earlier. Oh, there's invisible demons everywhere, and they might be attacking you at any second. Ed Warren really ran with this, though, this whole possessed dolls, demonically possessed dolls. He loved demonically possessed dolls because do you know what else he did? He also claimed that Cabbage Patch dolls attracted demons. This is what he said. He said, I think he even said there was like a plague or like a pandemic or a demonic infestation or something about Cabbage Patch dolls attracting demons to possess their little doll bodies, which he said would then allow them to levitate and also say things. They weren't talking dolls, to be clear. Cabbage Patch dolls, if you've never met them, can't talk as a general rule. But he says that these demons would possess them, in which case they would then say things like, I'm not just a doll, I'm the Lord of Hell. So he just had like a thing for evil dolls, I guess. I don't know, I don't get it. And when I was Googling this, I really did not expect to come up what came up. The Duggars, the family from the infamous TLC show 19 Kids and Counting. The Duggars, they buy into this Cabbage Patch dolls being possessed by Satan and demons thing. I mean, I'm sure that's not shocking to anyone who's even remotely familiar with the Duggars. But I mean, no doubt they've gone on to then influence other people to believe the same. So thanks, Ed. Thanks for that. Okay, I said we were going to talk about it. We're going to talk about it. Robert the Doll, one of the haunted, possessed dolls that predates Annabelle. If you haven't heard a story about Robert the Doll, I'm just giving you a super nutshell version. Please go find a podcast about Robert the Doll and listen because it's a wild ride. But in a nutshell, Robert the Doll is a supposedly true story of a haunted doll. Now, these stories date back to at least the 1930s, and they got worse in the 70s. But Robert was created by the Steiff, I don't know how to pronounce it, company around 1904 and gifted to a Key West boy by the name of Robert Eugene Otto. You may be saying, I thought the doll's name was Robert. It is. It's weird. The child, Robert Eugene, went by the name Gene. And then he named his doll after himself, after his first name that he doesn't use. Very weird. Also weird was how huge this doll was. I don't know what it is about huge dolls in this story, but I mean, this doll is 40 inches tall, twice as big as Raggedy Ann. So that's nearly 3.5 feet tall. I feel like if you are a doll and you are over 20 inches tall, I do feel like there's a case to be made. I feel like maybe you do have a higher chance of being possessed just because we just don't need dolls that are like the size of children. I just don't think we need it. So maybe just keep an eye on that. If you've got a doll that's taller than 20 inches in your home, just stay vigilant. Keep me updated if anything spooky happens. So this doll would supposedly get into all sorts of mischief and tomfoolery that Jean's parents would, of course, blame Jean for. And then Jean would, of course, blame it on Robert. Oh, Robert did it. Robert did it. It was Robert. He's the one. Well, you know, he didn't grow out of this because he still had Robert the doll when he grew up and got married. And his wife, understandably, didn't like it. His wife didn't like the doll. And, you know, kind of like when, okay, I hate man caves, but it sounds like that's what happened here. I think they got married and then Jean was like, well, I don't want to get rid of Robert. I know, I'll put him in my man cave. His man cave in this instance was some sort of weird turret room, which is like up in the attic and has a window outside, and people could see the doll from the window. I don't fully understand the way that buildings work, apparently, because I've never heard of anything like this room. Anyway, his man cave was up there, and that's where he locked Robert away because his wife hated it. Well, here's the thing. Shortly after, his wife was supposedly stricken with insanity, obviously because Robert the doll cursed her with an insanity curse. I don't know. And then people who passed by the house when Robert was in his confinement in his man cave reported seeing the doll move or change positions, which is very creepy. Very creepy. So eventually, Robert the doll ended up being donated to the Fort East Martello. That might be Martello. I actually don't know which one it is, and I'm going to let someone correct me. The Fort East Martello Museum in Key West, Florida, where he's currently on display. But beware. If you take his photo without asking permission, Robert the doll will put a curse on you. His display case is apparently covered in letters of apology that are sent in by people who took his photo without consent. And then they had nothing but terrible luck afterwards. So they're writing him like, please forgive me, Robert. I'm so sorry I took your photo. Please just stop making me lose all of my jobs and my dog and my truck. And wait a minute. Maybe Robert the doll is somehow partially responsible for all of the country music that we have today. Interesting. So there's that doll. Which listen, that doll was around well prior to 1980 and also prior to 1970 when the story of Annabelle was supposed to have happened. And that's when we first hear about Annabelle's 1980, remember? So this still definitely predates that. The other thing that I said we were going to talk about, the Twilight Zone episode. I was obsessed with Twilight Zone as a kid. I loved the Twilight Zone. So this episode is one of the classic ones, and I'll tell you in a minute why you might recognize this episode, even having not seen it. So the Twilight Zone episode called Living Doll was from 1963. It was about a doll that comes to evil life, and spoiler alert for a 60-year-old show, spoiler alert, the doll commits murder. And yes, like I said, the mother's name in this episode really is Annabelle. I really don't know how much more on the nose you can be about it. So, because genuinely, it seems like even if Ed and Lorraine didn't set out specifically to copy this episode, they must have seen it and like subconsciously associated the name Annabelle with murderous dolls. I don't know. So in the episode, the dad has this weird beef with this sentient doll. Like the doll is talking out loud and he's having conversations with the doll. The doll does not like him. And I'm going to go with the doll with this one. I feel like the doll, Talkie Tina is the name of the doll, by the way. I feel like Talkie Tina was onto something here. He just seemed a little red flag. We'll call it a red flag. If your husband or father or partner has beef with a Talkie Tina doll, we'll just call that a red flag. And not only does he have beef with this doll, he also holds up a lit match to her face and she goes, ow. And then he makes a comment that's like, oh, if you can feel, then I can hurt you. What? Where's that like red flag guy on TikTok, like waving it around aggressively? Then the doll tells him, after he's just said, then I can hurt you, she says, not really, but I can hurt you. Hell yeah, Tina. Hell yeah. Hurt him. I'm here for it. This is a great... I don't remember cheering for Tina when I was a child, but now I need to rewatch this episode. I think I'm going to have a completely different point of view about it. Okay, so Talkie Tina is the doll that was used in this episode. Talkie Tina is a reference to Chatty Cathy, but in the doll in the actual episode was made by the Vogue Doll Company, and it was marketed under the name Briquette, which makes me think of charcoal. So I don't know, but it's spelled Brikette. But it was just a normal doll. It didn't talk. On the Twilight Zone, though, obviously they needed a talking doll, but they didn't want to use the look of the Chatty Cathy doll. So just like with Annabelle, how the movie makes the doll look different than the actual story, they swap it up a little as well. So they use this briquette, this charcoal doll. They use briquette as the doll, and then they use actually the voice of the Chatty Cathy doll in the episode. The same actress, June Foray, who was a famous voice actress at the time, she did the voice for the Chatty Cathy doll, and then she also did the episode for the Talkie Tina doll in the episode, which if you think about it, if you had a Chatty Cathy doll in your home when this episode was released in 1963, and it's using the same voice as the Chatty Cathy doll in your house, and it's saying things like, I don't like you anymore, and I'm going to kill you. Like, oh, just imagine how terrifying that was, and how like that put in the public consciousness this thought of haunted, demonically possessed dolls. And here's Rod Sterling's intro for the Twilight Zone episode, which I am purely including because I want to try out my Rod Sterling impression. And I want to say I meant to listen to him read this first so I could compare, but I didn't. So this is not with reference. I'm going to give it a go. Here we go. Talkie Tina, a doll that does everything. A lifelike creation of plastic and springs and painted smile. To Eric Strader, she is the most unwelcome addition to his household, but without her, he'd never enter the Twilight Zone. Da 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 da. I don't even want to know how that went. You tell me. Let me know in the comments. So some of you, like I was saying earlier, some of you may not have actually seen this actual Twilight Zone episode. However, I bet that you may be familiar with it because it was parodied in The Simpsons Treehouse of Horror 3 Halloween special in 1992, which was so long ago. And it's a Krusty doll that comes to life to terrorize Homer. It's a great episode. The Simpsons did a lot of Twilight Zone references and Twilight Zone remakes in their Treehouse of Horror episodes. Still holds up. So where is Annabelle now? You may be asking. Well, Annabelle is safely tucked away inside the Warrens' Occult Museum, which is located in the basement of the house that they lived in Monroe, Connecticut, which had to close to the public in 2019 because even a demonologist is no match for zoning laws. Since the museum was in a house basement, it wasn't zoned to be a museum, which makes sense because actually nothing about this museum really looks like a museum anyway. If you look up pictures, it really just kind of looks like your weird great uncle Stan's collection of oddities. Truly, if you watch Gravity Falls, I just get such Grunkle Stan. I get such Grunkle Stan energy from Ed Warren, honestly. You've got like Halloween decorations just haphazardly placed beside what they insist are like relics or cursed objects. It's just really weird. It's just a bunch of tchotchkes, creepy tchotchkes. It's definitely a choice. So this museum, which you can no longer visit, unfortunately, this museum featured a collection of artifacts and trinkets from the Warrens they claimed were defiled by evil, including an alleged vampire's coffin. Okay. An alleged vampire's coffin. I wish I was making this up. If I was making it up, I wouldn't be this brazen if I was making this up. An alleged vampire's coffin, a child's tombstone that had been used as a satanic altar, death curses, unclear what that means, demon masks. Again, I kind of don't know what that means either. Like, is it a mask that a demon used to wear? Is it like the mask? Do they have the mask in the museum? Have people tried to put it on? I don't know. Listen, they've got a bunch of weird stuff like those, okay? But the star of the show, the Bella de Ball, the Annabelle of Annabelle. I'm so proud. I'm so happy with that. Annabelle de Annabelle. She was the star of the show. She was prominently displayed in this strange, like, miniature house thing. It's like a mini church. Like, it's got a little, like, here's the church, here's the steeple. Like, it's got like a little roof, and it's wood, except the front door is glass, which allows you to see in. So it's a display case. It's really weird. It's got a cross hanging above the door, and there's a hand-painted sign inside of the case beside Annabelle that says, "Warning, positively do not open." And weirdly, there's also this tarot card nailed on the door. Ed and Lorraine Warren were super Catholic, so I find that really weird. And if you're curious, if you're into tarot, or even if you're not, if you're curious, the tarot card on the door is the devil card. I personally think that they just thought that gives it like a little mwah, like a little je ne sais quoi. Like it's just gives it that extra little touch and a nod to make sure people know that they don't forget that this is a devil-infested doll. That's what I think that it's there for. But I don't know. Tell me. Here's what I'll tell you what the devil card means when it's upright, which it is. The devil card in tarot means bondage, enslavement, fear, feeling trapped, materialism, temptation, unhealthy relationships. I just feel like the feeling trapped part, that just seems like salt in the wound for poor Annabelle. She's trapped in there. She's feeling very trapped. She's feeling enslaved. She might be feeling fear. And you want to talk about materialism? What the hell else is the entire Warren's Occult Museum other than just materialism? Anyway, okay, I could really talk about this strange little house that I assume Ed built her. I could go on about it because, okay, you know what? I am going to go on about it because here's the thing. You can Google it, pull it up, look up the weird little house that she's stored in. If it's so important that you keep her away from people so that she doesn't do any more harm, right? If that's their goal, is to reduce harm, if Ed and Lorraine Warren are setting out to rescue people and to save them from demons and, you know, like bring them to Catholicism, presumably, like bring them to Jesus and God. If that's the idea, I just find it really weird that he's like, you know what I'll do? I'll put a glass display case in the front. Like, this doll can levitate. This doll can move around. It can open doors. It's been established in the story that it either opened doors or phased through walls in order to get back into Donna's bedroom, if you'll remember. And if this Raggedy Ann doll can choke a man out so hard he passes out, I just feel like she'll be able to break through glass with her weird little mitten hands. I don't think it's safe. So it's almost as if the purpose of putting her in a box with a display case, with a display door, is to charge admission for your museum. I don't know. I'm just thinking. I'm just spitballing. I don't know. What do I know? I don't know. Like, is she really trapped in that box? Because here's the thing. In some of the photos I found of this little house she's living in, there's clearly like a sliding lock on the outside, like that you slide into place so that she can't open it. And in that photo, there's also a little hook latch up at the top, and there's a padlock on the little door handle so that her, like I said, like her little soft little fabric doll hands can't pry the door open. Although I do still think she could break open the glass. But hold on, because then in another photo, it looks like there's an actual like key lock in the door, like that actually uses a key. But there's no sliding lock in that picture. So they've obviously been like making changes and possibly, hopefully, upgrades in the security of the Annabelle doll. But hold on, because then in other photos, all I can see is there's no locking mechanism. All I can see is that they have hung a novelty keychain on the door handle, which is not even in any way securing anything. It's just like a loop handle. So they've got like a novelty keychain hanging from the handle. Like, I mean, I'm serious, like a little hologram skull keychain. Definitely no sort of locking mechanism. Hold on, let's go back. In the photo where there's a padlock on the handle, the padlock is just locked onto the handle. It's not locking anything shut. Like, there would need to be a chain of some sort for the padlock to lock onto, and there isn't. It's literally just hanging on the door handle. You know, it's almost as if this is all for show. Okay, one last detail about her little abode. The positively do not open sign, when it's displayed in this box that she's in, they don't even have it. They haven't even bothered to display the warning sign properly. It's literally cut off because it should be raised up a few inches because it cuts off the bottom of the sign. So all you can see is that it says, warning, positively do not, that's it. Do not what? Do not what? What if this is my first time at the occult museum and I don't know the story behind Annabelle and I see this sign and all that there is on the door handle is this holographic skull keychain and it says, warning, positively do not. And I'm like, what does it say? I want to know. So I open the door and now I have allowed Annabelle to escape. Now look what you've done because you just can't bother to put the sign up properly. It's a security nightmare. I don't know. I don't know what to say. It's not good. It's not secure. She's not safe. So, in addition to the three Annabelle movies, in addition to seeing her at the museum when it was open before it got closed, there's been another opportunity to get closer to Annabelle. Very, very close, extremely close. Because in 2023, Harridan Vodka released 666 bottles of Paranormal Reserve vodka that had been placed for 30 days near Annabelle's weird little enclosure. Yes, you heard right. The vodka came in a wooden box featuring a functional Ouija board on its lid. And it also came with gloves for handling the bottle because you don't want to touch the bottle directly. Otherwise, you might, I don't know, get cursed, but you're going to drink the vodka. Oh no. Okay, so the back of the label is inscribed with "Help me, help us," like Annabelle purportedly wrote on the parchment paper in Donna's apartment. So very creepy. Just like putting the putting the bottles of vodka like just near Annabelle's little house. It's kind of like the LaCroix model. I think that's the method that LaCroix uses, where you just place the fizzy water kind of in the general vicinity of a fruit and you just pray for osmosis. I think that's kind of what they were going for. So wait, hold on though. Hold on, because the 666th bottle of Annabelle vodka was placed directly inside of Annabelle's creepy little protective case for 30 days. Ooh. I don't know what they were. I don't know, did she sneak some? Like, are we sure that the bottle was still sealed when it was released? Like, did she drink any of it? I don't know. I'm not sure. This bottle, the 666th, it's hard to say. The 666th bottle of Annabelle vodka goes for the low, low price of $13,000. $13,000. $13,000. Thankfully, it comes in a one-of-a-kind bespoke wooden case directly inspired by Annabelle's current confines. So, you've got that going for you, which is nice. Hold on, just as a side note, when you hear about something being exorbitantly expensive like that, like $13,000 for a bottle of vodka or like a $6,000 burger, that's purely marketing. It's straight PR. So they do something crazy like that to make it more enticing for publications to pick up their press release and report on it, because no one wants to talk about, I was going to say no one wants to talk about a haunted vodka that's only $100 or $200, but actually I do feel like that's newsworthy. But they are definitely more incentivized to run a story about a $13,000 bottle of vodka. I assume that putting the price at $666 wasn't high enough to get the attention of news publications. So I guess they just went with unlucky 13 and then a bunch of zeros. So anyway, a portion of all Paranormal Reserve sales of the Annabelle vodka benefited Toys for Tots. Well, that's sweet. And let's also hope that none of those toys for the tots were possessed by a demon. And also hopefully someone bought that $13,000 bottle, because if that bottle was included in the portion of the sales that benefiting Toys for Tots, then that's a lot of money for charity. I hope so. So also, I thought that this was a special vodka specific to Annabelle. When I first heard about it, I hadn't heard of any other kind of weird haunted vodkas. Au contraire. Harridan Vodka has been releasing a new Paranormal Reserve every year since 2021, from what I can see. I think they started in 2020. This year's, 2024's, Paranormal Reserve is the Asylum Edition. This limited edition collection of the Harridan Vodka was arrested for a month in two of America's most haunted asylums, the Trans-Allegheny, I don't know, Lunatic Asylum in West Virginia, and the Pennhurst Asylum in Pennsylvania. Just $179.99. That's $179.99. So much more affordable than $13,000. Now, I thought originally that the gloves that the Annabelle vodka included was a nod to how Ed Warren has said he handled the Annabelle doll. He said that he would do, I don't know, all these different kinds of Catholic blessings and I don't know, like a Hail Mary or something. And maybe there was holy water involved. And there was some kind of like Catholic light that would surround him. And then he would feel like he was fortified enough in order to handle the doll. And then he would put on really thick gloves. And then he would open the door and then move the doll with the gloves. So when I first heard that the Annabelle vodka came with a pair of gloves, I was like, wow, what an interesting nod to this obscure fact from Ed Warren. Oh, okay. Actually, no. All of the Paranormal Reserve vodkas, going back to even 2021, all come with gloves for safe handling. So, okay, it's not a specific nod to Annabelle. I've said nod a lot, I feel like, in the last 30 seconds. We're just going to keep moving. But it's a thing that the Paranormal Reserve Harridan vodka does, which I think is actually even cooler that it's not specific to Annabelle. And honestly, at first, when I first heard about this Annabelle vodka, I was like, wow, that's pretty metal. Very cool. But then as I was reading more about Ed and Lorraine Warren, I was like, I don't know about this. I don't think I like this anymore. But then I did research on this Harridan vodka and saw all of their cool branding and read about them. It's like they're super cool. They're super witchy, woman owned. So I'm definitely not sponsored by Harridan vodka, but I am now a fan. So go check them out. They've got cool, occulty, witchy, spooky, haunted vodka. So go check them out. Harridan.com, Harridan. And apparently Harridan means a strict, bossy, or belligerent old woman. So even more to love. So go buy some Harridan vodka for your friends, buy it for your enemies. And you know what? Hold on. Here's what you do. You buy it for your enemies. You don't give your enemies the gloves. You take the gloves out. So your enemies are handling cursed, haunted vodka bottles. And then your friends do get the gloves. And so they're protected. So this is what you can do for Christmas this year. Buy Harridan vodka for all your enemies and don't give them the protective gloves. Let me know how it works out for you. So that's the story of Annabelle, the original case file of Ed and Lorraine Warren, who inspired 3 Annabelle movies and will probably inspire more Annabelle movies if I know anything about movie companies. just assuming. So I'm not sure yet what my next deep dive episode will be about. However, if you want to have an opinion on it, join my Patreon. Because there, you will have access to special patron-only polls where you get to vote on the next topics. And on top of that, I will read your name at the beginning of every episode. Join me in 2 weeks when I will go back to the normal format of reading your true, spooky, unexplained stories, with my commentary in between, of course. So thanks so much for listening, and I'll see y'all next time. Thank you so much for joining me for such a lovely spooky time. Remember, you can feel afraid and not be in danger. If you've enjoyed yourself, please follow the podcast so you can get alerts when new episodes come out. And if you've really enjoyed yourself, it would mean a lot to me if you would tell a friend about the podcast and follow me on Instagram at Madame Strangeways, or leave me a rating or review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Or, just send me an email at madamestrangeways@gmail.com to just say hello. I'd appreciate it. Madame Strangeways is produced and narrated by me, Madame Strangeways. Theme music is by Marina Ryan. at marinamakes.co. You can submit your own strange story at madamestrangeways.com or send in your thoughts or theories on the stories in this episode to madamestrangeways@gmail.com. Thank you for listening. Until next time.